You just got pulled over for a ticky-tack traffic violation. When the officer walks up to your front window, takes your license and insurance, goes back to the cruiser, and walks back up to write you a ticket. Normal traffic stop, right? Should be over in less than 5 minutes. But then he walks back to your window and says something to you that changes everything. Hang tight. I'm calling a K-9 unit out here. Now your heart is pounding. You're not carrying anything illegal. You've got nothing to hide. But the second you hear the words drug dog, something goes off in your brain, you freeze. And what you say in the next 60 seconds will determine whether you can start your car and drive away or whether the cop's getting you out of the car and tearing everything apart. And I need you to understand something. Most people get this completely wrong. In fact, after handling literally thousands of drug cases, what most people do in this situation is the single biggest gift they could possibly give law enforcement. But I'm not just going to show you this mistake. I'm going to give you the exact words to say, words that come directly from a United States Supreme Court case. And once you hear them, you'll be frustrated somebody didn't tell you them sooner. You see, when cops say, "I'm going to get a drug dog," that's not really a legal order. It's a pressure tactic. It's designed to do one thing, make you so scared or uncomfortable that you end up doing their job for them. And let me show you exactly how it works. The officer just finished writing your ticket. The traffic stop is legally over, but he doesn't want it to be over. He really wants to search your car. Problem is, he doesn't have a warrant and he doesn't have probable cause. In fact, he's got nothing. So he decides to drop those words, "I'm calling out the drug dog." And usually the cop will then look at you and wait, because he knows that most people will do one of three things, and each one of them is a trap. Response number one, "Go ahead, officer. I've got nothing to hide." I hear this one constantly, and I certainly understand the logic. If you've done nothing wrong, why not let the cop take a look? Here's why you should care. The words "go ahead" are consent. You just gave that police officer legal permission to completely search your vehicle, and if necessary, tear the whole thing apart. That means anything they find, I mean anything, even something some passenger left behind, even something you forgot about way back in the back seat. All of it can be used against you in court. Those three words, "Go ahead, officer," case over. Response number two, you just sit there and wait. You don't say anything. You figure the dog will come sniff around, find nothing, and you'll be on your way. But here's the problem. That drug dog might be 20 minutes away, an hour away, 2 hours away, 3 hours away, and every single minute you sit there without objecting, you're telling the court you were fine with waiting. You didn't assert your rights. You didn't ask to leave. And as far as the law is concerned, you agreed and volunteered to stay there. Then response number three, you get nervous. Maybe you start fidgeting. Maybe your hands start to shake or you begin to sweat. Maybe you start looking around. And now the officer's watching every little move you make and every single thing you do. Subject appeared nervous. Subject was sweating and avoided eye contact. Subject's hands were trembling. And now that nervousness, which is a completely normal behavior if someone's threatening you with a drug dog search, now becomes enough for the officer to claim he's got reasonable suspicion and possibly probable cause to continue on with the search. I've seen this play out hundreds of times. So, every response seems to work against you. Consent destroys you. Waiting surrenders your rights. And merely being human gets used as evidence. But here's where it gets interesting, because there's a Supreme Court case that changes everything, and that cop hopes you don't know about it. In 2015, the Supreme Court decided a case known as Rodriguez versus United States, and the court held that the police cannot extend a completed traffic stop, not even 7 or 8 minutes, to wait for a drug dog unless the police officer has independent reasonable suspicion that you are involved in some type of criminal activity. Let me say that again. Once the purpose of your traffic stop is complete, meaning what? The officer wrote the ticket, handed you the ticket, and now there's nothing left to do. The cops cannot hold you, not even for 1 extra second to wait for a drug dog. The Supreme Court said specifically, this is an unconstitutional seizure under the Fourth Amendment. That means the moment your traffic stop's done, You have a constitutional right to leave the scene. Now, here's the part that should really make you angry, because even though the Supreme Court made this decision all the way back in 2015, most cops expect and know you probably don't know this ruling. They're counting on the fact that you'll sit there scared and silent, waiting out the clock for an hour if need be, for the drug to show up. Or they're counting on you to get super nervous, start to sweat, start to look around, and now they have that extra reasonable suspicion they needed to hold you at the scene till the drug dog gets there. And here's where it gets worse. Because even if the drug dog does show up, it doesn't mean it's reliable. A Chicago Tribune investigation found that drug dogs were wrong 56% of the time. That's more than half. And for Hispanic drivers, the false positive rate was somehow more than 73%. How is this possible, you say? Well, a study out of UC Davis determined that when a handler, meaning a cop, believes that drugs are present, they found that drug dogs alert to the so-called drugs way more frequently, even when there's nothing there. The handler's bias, hoping that the dog will alert, will lead the dog to alert. So don't see this drug dog evidence as infallible evidence. You're dealing with an animal that merely wants to please its master, and its reliability is nothing better than a coin flip. And here's the scary part. Under the Supreme Court case of Florida versus Harris, if that drug dog alerts onto your vehicle, even if it was a false alert, it allows the cops to completely search your car and rip everything apart. Your car gets destroyed. Seats pulled out, trunk emptied on the highway, all because of a dog that's wrong more than half the time. Which brings me to the exact words you need to say that come from the Supreme Court case itself. Because after all, you can't consent. That's a trap. You can't just sit there. You're surrendering your rights. You can't get nervous because they'll certainly use that against you. And if you're rude or confrontational, the officer holds it against you and he rips everything apart in your car anyway. So you can't talk, you can't wait, and you can't react. What on earth are you supposed to do? Hear the exact words and memorize them. Officer, are you detaining me right now or am I free to go? These are literally magic words, and they must be the first things that come out of your mouth. Oh, and they must absolutely be recorded by you because you never want to count on the officer's body cam working. You see, that single question to the cop changes the entire encounter. If the officer says, "No, no, no, the traffic stop's complete, but I still need you to wait for a drug dog." Here's your next line. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches. Am I free to leave? If I am free to leave, I'm now leaving the scene." And if the officer says, "No, you're not free to leave, you are being detained," you now say this. "If that's the case, I do not consent to any searches, and I refuse to answer any further questions without my attorney present." Then you've got to stop talking completely, but you say, "Wait a minute, Jeff, why are these such legally magic words? Let's break it down. Am I detained or am I free to go?" This forces the cop to make a legal commitment. He must choose. If he has enough independent evidence to hold you, he's going to have to say so at this point in order to justify detaining you further. If he has no independent, reasonable suspicion, he is now required under the law to let you go. The Rodriguez case said so. And now that question is on his body cam or your cell phone, so it can be used against that cop if he continues to violate your rights. Are you detaining me or am I free to go? I do not consent to any searches. This is your Fourth Amendment right and it's bulletproof. Without any independent, reasonable suspicion here to wait any further, the cop has no ability to dig into your car or search for anything. And by saying it clearly on camera, you've eliminated the number one shortcut police officers love to use to get around your constitutional rights. And finally, I'd like to leave. Now, this clearly establishes not only did you invoke your constitutional rights, you're no longer voluntarily staying. If the officer holds you still, every second from that point forward is legally suspect and likely to be thrown out in court. Now, what if the officer pushes back and says, "Hey man, if you got nothing to hide, why wouldn't you wait around for a minute? Here's your comeback line. Officer, I'm merely exercising my rights, and that's not evidence of anything. And as I've covered on my previous videos, Exercising your rights can never be used against you. And if the cops continue to persist in violating your constitutional rights and they bring that drug dog around your car or they rip your car apart, always stay silent, remain calm, and remember the fight is in the courtroom and not on the roadside. Because knowing these strategies, the pressure tactics of the cops, the exact constitutional rights you possess, and the words to use to stop these police officers can make the biggest difference between those that have their rights violated in their car torn apart, or those who will look at the officer and they're able to drive away. But what if, instead of holding you for a drug dog, the cop leans in and says, "I think I smell alcohol"? Check out this next video where I break down the word for word response you can use against cops when they claim they smell alcohol. And trust me, this trap by the cops is even more dangerous.